Well, I don't know how many years on this earth I got left. I'm gonna get real weird with it.
Hello again, my beauties and bees. Welcome back to Just a Theory. Today's kind of a special day for me because we're coming around to the day I came out publicly, right? Like I came out. It'll be between this week and last week, or in the next show. But when I came out, I got so much support from the community, right? So much support from everybody. It's been 2 years now. Said, Bree, we stand with you. Whatever you choose to do, however you want to move forward, we're with you. And there was just all around good cheer about it, right? And then the people that I had been setting up debates with, and the people who I had been scheduling things to on the other side dropped out. Nobody would touch me anymore. They sure would make videos about me though, and one of those people that liked to make videos about me right after my transition was Matt Powell, right? The apologist who says the air and space is different, so the fire is different. This brilliant young man who thinks the earth is 6,000 years old, thinks the universe is 6,000 years old, used to do videos about little old me. See? There I am with Knock and AJ. Now, my transition was public. You know, I'm not like ashamed of who I used to be or what I used to look like before I transitioned. You know, I was me and I'm me now. I just wore a costume back then. But Matt thinks it's truly the creepiest thing you'll ever see, Miss Bumblebee is. I'm creepy. There's 1 year ago, so these are going back 3 years from now. And have me.
This audience, that's
there's me before.
Matt definitely putting out there.
Same person, just 1 year later.
Happy to be back on the perspective again. This is my second time since our hiatus, and I'm just loving being back taking these calls.
There's me and my little people. I talk to people about an ugly duckling face. This is it. Look at that. Look at the eyebrow. Oh my god, the freaking lipstick's bad. There's no contouring at all. But I'll probably look back at myself right now on makeup I'm doing and be like, in a couple years. So we'll see. Anyway, so that's the history. I'm not going to watch.
Why would you trust your favorite cartoon YouTuber, your Marvel comic YouTuber, that is living in a fantasy, that can't even figure out what gender they are? Why would you trust anything they say? Is it rational to trust somebody who starts out as a man and then transitions and said he is a woman when he's still a man? Why would you trust somebody?
I look adorable there, though. I mean, I'm still, like I said, I'm like egg, but like just out of the egg. But I look cute, like I'm figuring things out.
Unstable to tell you stability and to tell you fact and truth. The truth is that they're.
And this one, the funny part is, he thinks my name was David. I don't know why. David, whatever, my dude. You're getting past that, Ember. Yeah. Anyway, this isn't the video I plan to watch though. This is from 2 years ago. I just wanted to show you guys the history we have, and but he thinks that Surus is a woman too, or is trans, because there's other people. But yeah, he's really into me. But anyway, he did this video. No skeptic can refute this evidence for Noah's flood. And I'd like to just respond to this if I could, because it's ridiculous. So I hope you're here for it, because this is going to be a long one. It's 22 minutes of freaking Matt Powell. I do have the temptation to call him Cupcake, but I've kind of moved past that point in my life where I need to call him Cupcake or anything like that. This is my pal. It's fine. He wants to call me names. That's okay. I'm just gonna call him what his name is, right?
History is the flood of Noah. One of the most verifiable events in all of history is the flood of Noah. Many people.
So we start off with a false claim that could easily disproven. There's no evidence for a flood of Noah because there wasn't a flood of Noah. Continuing on.
Believe that it's a myth, that Noah was a mythical man that never existed. Well, in this seminar, I'm going to give you a very strong defense of Noah's Ark. This is the case for Noah's flood. In the center of the United States, we find hundreds and hundreds of dinosaur graveyards. Each one of these dots that you can see represents a graveyard that contains sometimes hundreds of thousands of fossils. How did a wave from the oceanic coast,
Dinosaur graveyards,
hundreds of miles away, make it all the way to the center of the United States to be able to bury?
He's talking about fossil beds and formations. I think I saw the Morrison Formation and there's
hundreds of thousands of dinosaurs with fish, sea life, and crustaceans all together in one event.
I don't think that there's necessarily a correlation between dinosaur fossils and sea life. I don't think they find a lot of marine animals with dinosaurs. I'm sure they do find some. I mean, there definitely would have been dinosaurs that lived in coastal plains and actually maybe even lived off the bounty of the sea, like some terrestrial animals do today, like bears and sea lions and things like that. You know, there's things that move between, sure, animals that move between environments.
The only explanation for that is the flood of Noah. Now, if you examine the dinosaur fossils that are found in these graveyards, you'll often find that they died in an asphyxiated position, meaning that they had suffocated to death, and they had to be...
No, that position is just the theropod death pose. Chickens do that now. Like, they don't need to be put in water either. You just lay them on the ground, and they'll rigor mortis will pull them into that pose as they decay. It's because that's how their bones sit together at rest when the tendons aren't pulling. That's why chickens sleep with their like chickens sleep like that, with like their neck all the way back and then their chin resting on their neck. Because, well, most birds sleep like that, except for really long neck birds like swans, but
be buried quickly in silt. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been preserved to begin with. Because remember, to get a fossil, you have to have rapid burial. And within some of these dinos, we find preserved blood cells. The blood cells have been analyzed by certain scientists.
By certain scientists, guys. Just certain scientists, right? Triceratop blood clots. Oh. From... they give a cause of death. They did a whole CSI investigation. And cause of death was drowning. I mean, I'm not saying that there were definitely triceratops that drowned. There were dinosaurs that drowned for sure. Probably lots of them. Probably a lot of the ones that are in the fossil record died from drowning. But to say that you can look at, oh my goodness.
And they found that the dinosaurs died from drowning. We also find collagen. Collagen has a half-life of 400 years. Remember, it's the soft material that's within the bones of these organisms. Check this out. It says scientists find collagen inside a 195 million year old bone. It says scientists are still trying to figure out how these protein fragments really managed to last so long in the first place. And one of the common things that we find in dinosaurs...
So this is the regular dinosaur soft tissue arguments where they're like, oh, but it was pliable. And yeah, once it was chemically treated and restored with... and the pliability was artificially restored to the molecules, then sure. But before that, it was a fossil. The blood was a fossil. So blood is red because it's rich in iron, right? Iron is so heavy that in the mineralization process, the iron part of the blood doesn't get replaced. It just stays. It just stays there. And if it's inside of a bone, then the structure of it from how it was in life will not change because it's preserved, it's encased inside a bone. So you have basically an iron stain of blood cells.
Dinosaur stomachs is grass and ferns. The dinosaurs were buried so quickly that these plants didn't even have time to be digested. We have a dinosaur right here that they call Skippy. It still has its intestines, colon, liver, muscles, and a windpipe. They're not fossilized.
They are they are fossilized, Matt. It's Lagerstätten. They're fossilized. They're mineralized. The substance that makes them up is not the stuff that made a dinosaur. That stuff is gone. What's in their place is minerals. Minerals that replace those bones as they eroded away and decayed. Except for things like iron.
They are intact organs. And this is a picture of a mummified nodosaur. It weighs 2,500 pounds and still has intestines.
Mummified is not what you're looking at there. That is not mummified. This was a float and bloat death is what I believe they've ruled this, which means that it was carried out to sea. We see this happen with cows, horses, hippos today. They swell up really big when they die from the gases in their body, and those plants and stuff that you said didn't have time to decay. So yeah, definitely it could be a great example of something that died and got fossilized in water. Sure, but what is the existence of fossils that were made by floods, even by rivers, by being flushed out to sea, do not in any way indicate a large flood event. I'm sorry.
And scientists believe that it was, quote, swept to sea by a flooding river, sank, landed on its back, and pressed into the ocean floor. And one of the common things that we find are clams.
It's called Lagerstätten.
On the top of Mount Everest.
I think I'm saying that right. Am I saying that right, Titan? You know how to say it. Lagerstätten, right?
They're in the closed position. Naturally, when a clam dies, it will open up. The muscle relaxes, and a scavenger comes and eats them. And so when you're at the beach...
I'm going to let you finish, but... I'm going to do my Kanye impression right there. I'm going to let you finish, but those are brachiopods on top of those mountains, not clams.
You'll notice that all of the shells are in two parts. These clams that are on the top of Mount Everest are closed. That means that they were catastrophically buried.
What is this? You got Kent Hovind slides here? Good grief.
And Mount Everest was pushed up through catastrophic plate tectonics, with the clams contained near the peak. And in the mountains of Peru, we find 11-foot wide oysters that weigh over 600 pounds. And if you look at them as well, they're also closed. And whatever had buried them...
I'm going to give you that. I'm going to say, if clams were buried so fast that they got buried with their mouths closed. So, do you know about the Burgess Shale? It's a whole formation that was trapped by a landslide. Yeah, those things happen. That's good for the fossil record for us to document these things. And its position in the geologic column tells us where and when it happened. I say where literally because the plates are moving around. So, like when the Burgess Shale happened, for instance, we know it was closer to the equator based on the life forms and what their requirements are for energy, for solar radiation. So we know that the plate was down lower. We can tell a lot about a formation.
Had to have been so powerful because they couldn't relax, they couldn't open when they died. They must have been buried by a tremendous amount of sediment. The Bible says 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. Check this out. It says,
doesn't that presume that all mountains are at least less than 15 cubits above sea level? No, they could be no more than 14 cubits. That's a short little mountain. Cubits aren't that big. What's a cubit like? How big is a cubit? I think it's like 3 feet. How big is a cubit? Like a meter. how big is a cubit? Cubit is 45.72 centimeters. So let's see. So like 1.5 feet long. Right? So that would work. Those are some tiny mountains, y'all.
A well-preserved whale fossil has been discovered on a California mountain. The nearly intact fossil of a whale has been unearthed at a construction site in Santa Cruz County. We also find whales that are buried in the...
You know that there used to be an ocean over there, right? Like the Great Basin used to be a inland sea. Yeah? You know about that? You heard about that? It's a big inland sea? Great Basin? Yeah.
in the vertical position. Check out this article. It says near Lompoc, California, an 80-foot whale fossil was found in a diatomaceous earth quarry. It was oriented vertically, standing on its tail, passing through millions of years of strata. Supposedly...
I like the illustration on that one. Back real quick. It's like somebody tried like a Moby Dick drawing. What are we looking at here? Vertical whale fossil from Talk Origins. Let's crack this nut open. Vertical whale fossil. Yeah, you don't see it anywhere. And I just want to... let me bring this over so you guys can see. Because you don't see anything on it anywhere else. That's Talk Origin, Institute for Creation, Talk Origin, Creation Wiki. This doesn't have anything to do with that. That's talking about the vertical, vertically through the skull of the interior. Yeah, that's not this nonsense. Creation.com. And that's nothing to do with this either. Antievolution.org. Diatom Quarry. Let's see if this has anything. The fossil forum here. Are they talking about the same thing? In paper, Snelling states the baleen whale fossil found in Lompoc is 10 to 12 million years old, not 50 million years old. It's hard to say for sure if this fossil is conspecific with the extinct Rockwell. Is that it? That's all you guys got to say about it? Found in vertical position. Let's see. Trying to find actual science on what we're looking at here. The old salt blog. Okay. Let's see here. They turned out to be 18 teeth and a flipper bone, a portion of a jaw and skull of a sperm whale is all well preserved. The fossils are believed to be 10 to 12 million years old. Okay. So, I do know that sperm whales sleep vertically. There's actually lots of cool videos of them sleeping like that. So, finding a sperm whale vertically seems like right, I guess. But there's a lot of things that could create such an effect. Predatory four-legged whale. That's nothing to do with this either. See, like answers in Genesis. The whale on its tail, scientific frontier. What do you say? Contrary to some reports that have circulated, the 80 to 90 foot long fossil baleen whale found in 1976 in an inclined position in diatomite unit in the Miguelito mines in Lompoc, California, was not buried while standing on its tail. On-site investigations have revealed that the diatomite unit which entombed the whale is also inclined at the same angle. So the rock that it's cased in is literally at the same angle. The whale having been buried in the diatomite unit while both were in a horizontal position, and subsequent Earth movements have tilted both. Nevertheless, the whale fossil still bears a testimony to its catastrophic burial, and thus that catastrophic disposition of the enclosing diatoms. There we go. Oh, not that one. Yikes. I'm going to close that. I didn't mean to pull that up. Sorry. Trigger. I don't mind looking at myself pre-transitioned. I just don't like it. It's like suddenly popping up on the screen.
Standing on its tail, passing through millions of years of strata. Supposedly, rock layers on the Earth take millions of years to slowly accumulate, and Noah's flood could not have been what put these layers here. Well, if you have a whale, basic common sense will tell you if it's connecting all of these layers, then all of these layers are the same age.
It wasn't through all those layers, though. It was through one layer, and then that layer the whole layer was dispositioned by Earth movement, by tectonics.
Because otherwise, if you had part of the whale getting submerged in these lower layers as they were slowly forming, the top part of the whale would have completely rotted off. It would have been eaten by critters and scavengers.
I tried to buy makeup with bunnies on it.
The entire whale was preserved from top to bottom. How does that?
I eat bugs, so you're gonna have a hard time turning me off of that. John Hudson, are you back? Yeah, diatomaceous earth is petrified phytoplankton. There you go. Whale puke is expensive because of the ambergris. Yeah.
Happen? How does it stand vertically? If these layers are supposedly millions of years of different time zones, gravity would have pulled the whale.
Did you look at this whale fossil, or did you just take what all those? I'm sure that Matt just takes what all these Yahoos at the top here, the top search results, pretty much everything. Again, Talk Origin, Institute of Creation, Talk Origin, Creation Wiki, Creation, Anti-Evolution. Yeah, it's all. That's where he's getting his resources, and that's their yuck.
Down flat or on its back, it wouldn't be standing upright if millions of years of geological accumulation of layers was what caused this fossil to come into existence. The flood of Noah was a real event that actually happened, and there is
evidence at all besides your book says so. You got anything, Matt? Anything at all? And might I suggest like maybe some soft backing music while you're doing your rant?
There's no question about that, and this is why the Bible tells us that in the last days there will be scoffers, people who mock the Bible, people who mock the flood of Noah and say that it never happened. It says, "For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water." The Bible.
And we've disproven that too, unless you're like a space denialist, right? Do you deny that outer space exists, Matt? I think I've heard you acknowledge the existence of outer space. So I want to think yes, that you believe it exists. So the waters above, we've looked for it, and we've been up there, and there's no waters up there. So I mean, there's that.
Goes on to say that whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. So the entire world at one point perished because of the flood of Noah. If you're going to assume that rock layers take millions of years to accumulate, that Noah's flood isn't what placed the whale there, then you have to explain how you get a vertical whale fossil that connects millions of years of supposed...
You don't. You get a whale in a diatomatic unit fossilized, and then you get continental upheaval.
Geologic time. You have to explain that. The burden of proof is on an evolutionist and an atheist to explain why we find these fossils.
And the explanation is readily available out there on the internet for you, Matt, if you go out and look instead of just trusting what creation.com and Talk Origins. Yeah.
And that people declare that we descended from slime and from fish is because they're looking at the lower layers of the geologic column and concluding that those are our ancestors, and that this geologic column timescale represents millions of years of slow and gradual accumulation of layers over time. But that is not true. If it were true,
a polystrate whale is the new argument that doesn't that is easily debunked, but polystrate whale, is that going to become the polystrate tree? Come like full circle from elephants to pine trees.
You wouldn't even find fossils. In National Geographic, in their section on fossils, they state that for an organism to be fossilized, the remains usually need to be covered by sediment soon after death. Sediment can include the sandy seafloor, lava, and even sticky tar. Once again, to get a fossil, it takes very particular conditions. It's not about time.
Now, they just named 3 different conditions that can lead to fossilization. Sandy seafloor, lava, sticky tar. Mud is one. Like I know that's the Creationist favorite set. Like river deposition mud, but they want to say it's global flood deposition mud. The tides can bury a fossil. On the bottom of a lake, just slow sediment of over years can bury a fossil, right? It doesn't even have to be rapid. If it's down in the bottom if it's in a poor anoxic condition where there's no life basically to scavenge on it, it doesn't even need to be rapid. It can literally what do they call it? Well, I know they call it marine snow but it happens in rivers and lakes too when they get the still parts. But yeah, that stuff can bury, and that's like actually when you talk about diatomaceous earth, that's what that is. A marine snow burying something. That whale was literally buried in marine snow, right?
Many people say it takes thousands of years for fossils to form. That's not true. The organism would rot while it's forming. There's no...
What do you think rotting is, Matt? Rotting, oh my goodness. Okay, so rotting is organisms consuming, bacteria and microbes consuming, and funguses and all sorts of stuff coming in and consuming the organic material. If it's in an environment where those organisms can't get to it, then they don't scavenge it, and it gets mineralized. As the elements that make up the organism seep out through the porosity of whatever media they're contained in, as that seeps out, minerals seep in to replace them. It's a process called fossilization. It happens over millions of years on the bottom of lakes. And sometimes it's not even the bone. Sometimes it's an impression of where something fell and died. Say it fell and died and smushed into the mud. Something swooped down and grabbed it, but it left that impression in the mud. That'll fossilize the same way when that marine snow settles into that shape of where it was.
A way that it would take thousands of years to even get one fossil. Fossilization is not about time. It is about conditions. And if you look at these coal seams here, you will find that there's identical amounts of C14 in each of the coal seams. Now, C14 only lasts 50,000 years. Max.
That is absolutely not true about the C14 in each one of those coal seams. That's absolutely false.
How is it that each of these coal seams contains an identical amount of C14? What it shows us is that all of these coal seams are the same age, that they all were formed in one event in rapid...
But there's layers of mineralized sediment between the coal seams. How do you explain that? Because you have coal seams, decaying plants, and deposition for millions of years. Then a layer of sediment over top of it, sealing it in. And then it can do another wetland maybe goes in, or a forest goes in above it. And that just keeps repeating. That's how that happens. How would this happen all at once? How would that even be a thing?
Succession. Coal comes from vegetation that's been smashed together between sediments. And some of these seams are over 100 feet in thickness. To be able to get a coal seam over 100 feet thick, it requires a global cataclysmic...
No, it requires a long period of time in which a wetland environment was thriving in this region. and that it grew on top of its own decaying progeny, I guess, or not progeny, ancestry. Yeah, it grew on the bones of its ancestry, and for hundreds of thousands to millions of years is what that tells me.
Condition. It doesn't require millions of years of time to slowly produce coal. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a coal seam this thick. You would have...
If you know a way to produce coal, like what we find in coal mines, artificially, or if you know a way to make it faster than the hundreds of millions of years that have gone into making the coal we have today, please let us know your process.
Really tiny coal seams all across the world. And one of the more common pieces of evidence that us creationists like to use is polystrata fossils. You can see trees that were catastrophic.
So first I want to say one thing, and everybody gets this wrong. Everybody gets this wrong, so don't feel bad if you get this wrong. Tree is not a clade. Tree is a niche. Many different clades can fill the niche of tree. And these are not the trees that we have today. And the niche they fill is not necessarily the same either. Because, well, these aren't necessarily something that grew in a forest, right? But that's neither here nor there. I just wanted to clarify that but these polystrate fossils, is a tree. I mean, I don't have to explain this to you guys how a tree, when it dies, it can stay standing. We've all had a tree somewhere, at some location, that stood dead for years, even decades. Around wherever we live or whatever. We get in trouble for, we had one, we call it the Halloween tree, because it was big and gnarly looking. And it slowly, over the years, of course it'd lose branches and stuff, but it stood for a good 12 years before somebody finally knocked it down. We get in trouble for climbing it though, because it was dead, and at, any point, the branch that you're standing on could just snap into sawdust, but we were stupid. I think it was I don't remember what kind of tree it was. I wanted to say it was an oak tree, but that's just my brain telling me that.
Perfectly buried in multiple layers of sediment. Just like the whales that we covered earlier, some of which are found in vertical positions connecting all of these layers of geologic time, we also find trees.
Yeah, and you can see multiple layers being laid down over different periods, and then ecologies growing on top of them, and then a new layer being laid down, and ecologies growing on top of them. It's not happening in 40 days and 40 nights of rain, I'll tell you that.
That go through all of these different layers that connect all of the...
This says polystata trees. Polystata. I'm pretty sure it means polystrate, but yeah, let's just bask in the typos.
This supposed geologic time. And what it shows is that all of these layers were laid down at the same time. How is a tree going to stand in the ground with sediments slowly forming around it for millions of years? Now, an objection that I've heard... It
doesn't need to be millions of years. It could be a local flood. It could... No, that's probably what I was going to say. I bet. It could be There's a lake up in the mountains where all the trees, I think it was when Mount St. Helen went off. I don't want to misspeak, but there's a big lake that's full of logs, right? And they do, some of them do stand upright, at least some of them do. I don't want to say all of them, but they do stand upright in the lake. So if there was a landslide, for instance, that filled all that in, those would be vertical trees.
To this is that these trees were covered by little local floods. Mm-hmm. But what they won't mention is that many of these trees are found upside down. Trees do not grow upside down, folks. What obviously happened was the tree was ripped out by a literal earthquake. It floated around.
Have you ever been down into the river bottoms after a flood and seen all the fun positions those trees end up in? I've seen plenty of trees upside down in the river bottoms, being covered with layers of sediment.
in the water for some time and then flipped upside down after that it became waterlogged and it went into the silt. The sediment layers formed around it, and that's what makes the most logical sense when looking at these polystrata fossils. It's not that they were sitting there for millions of years of time, or that
I want to see that when you're done with it, John. That sounds awesome. 14-foot tall Baphomet from the live oak. Is it on your property? I'm sorry about your oak tree if it is. Oak trees live for a long time, so it's sad when one dies. It's like an elephant dying.
They got buried in local small events. A tree is an organism just like any other biological organism in nature. It's all biodegradable material.
But when he says local small events, I want to make everybody completely aware that every geological event that's happened in recorded human history has been a local and small event. We haven't had a global catastrophe, right? With it of the likes of which kills dinosaurs and megafauna. We haven't had that. Well, I mean, we are that, but we haven't had a natural geological one like a meteor strike or some traps opening up.
It will break down over time if not quickly protected. And those layers formed quickly around these trees and were thus able to protect the trees from decay and deterioration. Noah's flood is what caused all of these fossils to come into existence. You have to have rapid burial for these things to even be preserved.
But why are there so many different layers, man? How many waves of the flood was that? What are you talking about? Whoosh. I can't even comprehend what you're thinking here.
There is no question about that. Noah's flood is a fact of geology. It's a fact of history. You can put your faith in it. A lot of people say that you can't trust the Bible or you can't trust the book of Genesis. Well, they'll go around saying there's more than 2 genders. Think about that.
Damn, Matt, you just got girl dick on the brain. Cannot stop thinking about that girl dick. You're gonna have to get over it, yeah. Have to move on from that, or like do some self-reflection on why you're so fascinated by the existence of trans people. Why even in a video about Noah's flood, you can't stop talking about trans people.
You can't trust them to get advanced geology right when they're not even correct about basic biology. They're so
genders aren't even basic biology. Gender is psychology and sociology, or psychosociology, if you want to meld them together under one umbrella. But that's, yeah, if you thinking it's biology proves that you don't know what you're talking about. It does have biological factors, and wow, surprise, surprise, that social and psychological stimulation can affect your biology, buddy. So, it is biological, just not in the way that you want it to be or you think it should be.
Clueless about almost everything. God was right. Mankind in the wisdom of men is often very foolish. But God was right. And this shows us that we can trust God.
Yes, neurology. Yeah, that neurology is definitely the catalyst by which we get the most biological responses to those social and psychological stimulations.
When he said that he flooded the world and that he will judge the world in the future. This has to be, in my opinion, one of the best pieces of evidence for Noah's flood. If you look at different mountain ranges, you'll actually see that they are made of bent rocks. What's going to happen if you were to try and bend hard rock? It's going to break it. The only way to be able to bend these layers and make them perfectly bent as you move up is if they're all moist and soft.
All of those that you've shown so far, I believe, if there's a geologist here, correct me, that this is not sedimentary. This is igneous, right? Do I have a geologist here today? Sometimes I have geologists. Sometimes Doc Dino or somebody will come in with that knows their advanced geology better than I do. I don't want to say what I think this is, but looks like basalt.
Simultaneously, and this could not have been the case if millions of years of slow and gradual geologic change was causing the landscape to morph into these positions. The rocks would have crumbled and shattered and broken. They would have eroded flat by gravity. These mountains wouldn't even exist.
but the mountains are, when a plate is subducted, it's subject to extreme heat and volcanism. So that's what bends the rocks. In case you were wondering, they're hot and then they bend. They get hot in the tectonics where the plates meet. Friction creates heat. But I mean, come on now, the whole inside of the Earth is full of heat. Look at this derpy face he's making. What a pause screen.
If millions of years of time existed. And this one is pretty cool because creation scientists tested the chemicals in these rocks. They tested the rocks at the peak and also the rocks at the base and many in between, and they found that the chemical analysis of the rocks came back as being identical.
Yeah, and sedimentary rock can be subducted and bent. In mountain building, sedimentary rock can be subducted and bent, but I think at least some of those he showed were I believe igneous.
If you're finding the same chemical components in all of these different layers from top to bottom, that means that all of these layers are the same age and that they were laid down in rapid succession during the flood of Noah. Look at this mountain.
It does? That's what it means? You're just so sure of yourself. Do you know how mountains are made, Matt? Do you know how much heat goes into making a mountain? Each mountain range, the Deccan traps are the result of when the Indian plate rammed into the Asian plate and raised up the Himalayas. The Deccan traps are freaking. They covered, I think, about a quarter of the land in India. Crazy heat. Mass extinction events.
Out it, you see different folds and bends in the layers that cannot be explained by slow and gradual shifts in the Earth's crust. Charles Lyell and Charles Darwin would have had us believe that these layers slowly accumulated and that these rocks would have bent into these positions slowly over time. These mountains would not even exist if evolution were true. They would have eroded flat because of gravity. And something that's similar to a polystrate but not quite the same, but still worth mentioning,
thank you, John.
is these dinosaur tracks that were...
Thank you guys for helping clarify the rock layer stuff for me here. Yeah, so metamorphosed rock is sedimentary rock that's been changed by volcanic processes. I like that.
Finding that penetrate all of these millions of years of geologic time. The only way to get a track that's preserved is if it's catastrophically buried and then protected. Think about it. If I was to say that there was a track of any animal, we'll use a dinosaur for example, since that's what we're looking at right now. And let's say it puts its foot in the ground, makes a track. Okay, well, that's going to get smoothed out over just a few days most likely, or even a few weeks.
How so? Like, I've seen, but like, footprints in where there's a mud puddle that last for months. Now, if something were to come along and cover that up, doesn't have to be a catastrophic worldwide flood, but anything comes along and covers that up. Some timber falls on it. Some, the desert blows in a freaking sand dune over it. I don't care. To cover it up, it's going to preserve it just like it is. He's adding like footprints in wet mud don't dry in like real time that we can see, that we're not aware that you can that tracks that were left in mud and then dried can last for decades as long as they go unmolested.
Rainfall will erode the track away. It will smooth it out. It will make it so that it doesn't exist.
What if it's someplace where it doesn't rain, Matt? What if a sand dune blew over it? What if it's in a intertidal zone and there's a tsunami that covers it up? What about that? There's a lot of factors that come into play.
Exist anymore. These dinosaur tracks, which we're finding in strides because they were running from the flood, were obviously protected quickly by sediments crashing down on top of them and sealing them into place. The way that evolutionists answer this
is really loud.
But you don't understand what sediments are. Sediments is not just, mud flowing in from a flood. Sediments also the slow deposition by wind erosion. The rain even has deposition that it leaves behind. The sedimentary rocks are preserved in minerals from the rainfall as well. That's the thing, Matt. It's a lot of factors that come into play to cover these up. It doesn't have to be rapid. Like I said, the stuff on the bottom of lakes is usually covered with the Lagerstätten are usually buried in like marine snow.
Laughable, because if you look at this photo, this is how they explain tracks that are fossilized. They make it look like the dinosaur was just trying to take a dive into the ocean. Well, even if that were true, what's going to happen?
What makes you think that's the ocean, though, my dude? Could be a lake, a pool, a pond, a river.
And from the water hitting those tracks. As the water moves, as the waves hit the shore, and you have the undertow going.
Still water doesn't exist anywhere. You'll never see an animal on video or photos of animals walking into and swimming across still water where they would leave footprints in the sediment.
It's going to knock out those tracks in less than a day. But according to evolution, it takes at least 10,000 years for a fossil to form.
No, footprint underwater can last just as long as a footprint above water in the right conditions.
So they expect us to believe that dinosaur tracks in water were lasting underwater for over 10,000 years to be able to be fossilized.
No, they could have been covered before that. Then that would be why what the cover was covered with and what they're made of would be two different layers of the strata, and that's how we would differentiate that. It wouldn't have to. Neither one of them have to sit alone for 10 million years.
One of the greatest places that we can look at to demonstrate the flood of Noah as being true is the Grand Canyon. Because if you look at the layers of the Grand Canyon, if you were to break them apart, you'll find that there are water ripples connecting some of the layers. They're fossilized trace remains of water ripples shooting through the layers. That means that
shouldn't your flood have destroyed all that?
It was water that laid down certain of these layers at the Grand Canyon. There's very little erosion between the rock layers. Think about it. If you have a layer forming and then for millions of years nature is taking its toll on this land, it's going to erode it. It's going to weather it.
Layers have to have in order for there to be a lot of layers like that, there has to be very little erosion, right? There actually has to be something laid down. It can't be sweeping it away as soon as it's getting laid down, or else you wouldn't have layers. That's what having layers means, Matt.
It's going to put marks into the land. Well, you don't really find much of that between the layers. What that means is that the layers are all the same age. In the Grand Canyon, we find salamander tracks 15 million years before.
Right, okay, let's talk about those salamander tracks, and then we'll say that under the next layer down, right underneath those are some trilobite tracks, yeah? And they're saying they're the same age. How is that underneath that? Make it make sense, Matt.
Or we find the salamander that made the track. The reason that this is because the salamanders were obviously trying to run up through these sedimentary layers as they were forming, and they were not.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, the tracks. He's claiming the tracks come up through the geologic column.
Able to outrun the mud that was coming in and covering them, and they died in the upper layers, not able to outrun the mud. We also find trilobite trails 15 million years before we find the trilobite that actually made the trail. What that shows us is that trilobites were also trying to run up through the mud. They were not able to escape it, and they were...
Trilobites running up through the mud. Are you kidding me here? He thinks that these organisms are moving up through the geological column, that their trackways are moving up through the geological column.
Were all buried catastrophically together as well. And on the UCMP's website for paleontology, they state about the tracks that if these impressions are covered with sediment before being washed away, they become preserved as fossils. One of the common findings that creationists will mention is...
That checks out though, Matt.
...that we find dinosaur and man tracks in the same layer. If dinosaurs and man...
But we don't, though. That's never happened. Not once. Not a single time. Do you think that's actually a real trackway? You don't the square toes and everything? You're cool with that?
And lived millions of years apart. And if these layers are millions of years of different ages, you're not going to find a man track and a dinosaur track in the same layer of hard rock. In this layer, you find the dinosaur track on top of the man's footprint. And what I find interesting about this one is if you look at the middle toe of the dinosaur, it shows that it actually stepped over a human footprint that already existed in the mud.
Like, do you really look at this and think that that's real? How does someone pull up this image with this cartoon dinosaur outline footprint? Oh.
Before this had solidified, while I was in a debate with Dr. Kenny Rhodes from Reasons to Believe, he looked at these fossils and said that it was likely that there was a creature that had a foot that looked like a man's foot. And really, I
imagine Kenny Rhodes was talking about, well, maybe he was, I don't know, was talking about the Paluxy trackway, which the Paluxy trackway is a dinosaur that's walking, and you can see the rest of the trackway that they don't show you in all the photos and stuff. Doesn't even look like a human footprint at all. There's one footprint where it looks like it maybe slid in the mud that made it look like it had a heel.
I feel like that's just a denial of the blatantly obvious evidence that we're looking at here. Obviously, we're looking at a man track and a dinosaur track in the same rock. We also find fossilized traces of water ripples, fossilized raindrop prints. I mean, how long...
None of that could work if there was a flood. The flood would have wiped all that away. Catastrophic flood that covers the whole globe and tumultuous storming seas.
Are these surface areas going to last before they get smoothed out by nature? Obviously, they had to be sealed...
Or smoothed out by your flood, like, immediately.
...quickly in order to be preserved. That's the only way that you get these fossilized remnants of raindrops, tracks, and water ripples. And the Bible tells us that the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And atheists for years have laughed at this. They think that it's absurd that there were 40 days and 40 nights of rainfall during the time of Noah's flood.
During current climate conditions. But 2 million years ago, or not 2 million years ago, for that 2 million years that it's talking about here, which was like hundreds of millions of years ago, the climatic conditions were different, and it was viable for there to be immense rainstorms that are pretty consistent due to climatic conditions. But we don't have those conditions today, and haven't had those conditions since, I want to say, since like the Paleozoic.
But if you were to type in rained for millions of years, here's the first thing that pops up. It says that time that it rained for 2 million years. Atheists believe that it rained for 2 million years. But they will declare that the Bible is false, that God's word is not true, because they think it's insane that it rained for 40 days and 40
nights. That it rained for 40 days and 40 nights under current conditions and the proposed conditions of the flood state. Yes, that's ridiculous. The conditions of the earth during this hot box period where it was just a balmy freaking I don't know exactly what locations they're looking at in those videos, but I know the time period they're talking about, and it was like a balmy rainforest condition. So yeah,
40 nights. What I'm about to share with you is probably the greatest argument that supports Noah's flood from geology. In the earth, you find gigantic 10-mile thick pieces of cold rock that have been subducted, parts of the crust of the earth that have been subducted into the hot mantle of the earth. Remember, the mantle is molten rock. Why is there cold rock that has been subducted into the molten mantle of the earth that is not heated up with the other rocks yet?
Hold on, before I get too far away from this, I wanted to just talk about the, because I had to pull it up. It's the Cardian Peluvial episode is what he's talking about. That's a different time period, though, yeah. The Cardian Peluvial episode was an event on Earth that took place at some point between 232 and 234 million years ago, when the Earth's climate changed rapidly. During the CPE, the Earth received very frequent intervals of heavy rain, heavy continuous rain. You know, so that's what he's talking about there.
The only way to explain it is that in the recent past, the crust of the earth was broken up, and that plates were moving under one another, and 10-mile thick pieces of rock got subducted down quickly into Earth's mantle, and they haven't been there long enough to become...
We have a different definition of quickly, though, because, yeah, the Indian plate, again, we'll go back to the Indian subcontinent. It was moving really fast across the Indian Ocean, escaping from Africa, who was its neighbor for millions of years on Gondwana land, escaping into the northern hemisphere. It crossed the equator at amazing speed. And when it crossed the Reunion hotspot, it went even faster. It was like booking it. So when it's moving that fast, it's going to subduct a lot of rock.
Uniform with the temperature of the rest of the mantle. This means that Noah's flood has been confirmed from geology. That if something like that was to take place right now, that it would shake up the entire planet. We wouldn't be able to survive.
Say what now?
If this sort of event took place today. And so if these cold rocks are still cold, which they are relative to the surrounding temperature in the mantle, then it means that they have not been there that long. And the only thing that could have put them there was rapid moving of those plates. And the only...
Okay, tell me one example of a flood causing tectonic plates to move. Cite where that happens naturally in the world. I want to know, where are you seeing this? Where have you seen floodwaters move tectonic plates?
The thing that could have caused rapid moving of those plates was a breaking up of the plates and rapid subduction that was caused by God allowing the earth to be destroyed by a flood.
Caused by God.
The flood of Noah happened. There's no doubt about it. The evidence is clear. You can either choose to accept or reject it. But I will say that if you doubt the Bible or you doubt the authenticity of the Word of God, just simply look at the evidence.
I did. I just debunked all your silly evidence. Oh my gosh, Calasia! You're so awesome! Congratulations to Paul Schlatter, Sam Plays XX, Dr. Osiris, Stephanie Helms, Sophia Athena, Book Lover 92, One Ring 42, Ryan Coltastic, Ember, welcome back, Ember, and Calasia was gifted a membership by Calasia. All right. Yay! Man has the mind of a 7-year-old. Yeah.
What does
like
the evidence tell us? It shows us that God has proven himself to be correct, that the Bible has proven itself to be true. And if you think about the fact that Noah was warning people.
It's fine, because when you forget to renew, I get these announcements when you get renewed. Like when you renew during a live show, I get an announcement, so that's always fun. Well, it'll tell me like on my next scheduled thing, if someone does in between shows, it'll say on the next one, oh, so-and-so has renewed their membership or whatever. But it's fun when it happens live. And I don't expect anybody to stay a member, for long periods of time and stuff. Spend a couple months throwing some money at me and then move on to the next person you like. That's fine. I don't shame anybody for saying, you know what, I'm gonna go help out this person now, because it's a big world. Lots of people need lots of help. Appreciate every one of you for all the help that you give me. It's still going towards right now any excess overflow after taking care of my needs and making sure that the channels that I'm running are sustained. It's going towards my electrolysis fund because I'm so sick of shaving. And Ember's ahead of me on that. She's beat me, and she's got getting her electrolysis done now.
Guys, get on the boat before it's too late. He warned people for over 100 years, and people mocked Noah. People made fun of him. They thought he was crazy. They told him he was a lunatic, and they said that they wouldn't have anything to do with the salvation that Noah was offering to them through this boat. God is always right. He's always true. He's
right. He builds into the story that he's always right. He's a Mary Sue. And Noah the story of Noah is just there to pinpoint that to you, to say, hey, anybody who's a naysayer is just one of these people that are naysaying Noah.
Unchanging. He has told us in his word that there's coming a judgment day, and people laugh at us just like they laughed at Noah for telling the truth about the gospel, that Jesus is the only way. It's going to be a very sad day when certain people are literally cast into the lake of fire to pay for their own sins. Let me say, God doesn't want anybody to go to hell. God has offered salvation to every single person that will ever come into existence or that ever has existed. He's offering you an ark, a place of escape, and that's through the Lord Jesus Christ. But the only way to be saved is by receiving that forgiveness. If you don't receive forgiveness for the wrongdoings that you've done in your life, then you will have to pay for your own sins, and you'll have to endure.
So now we got fear-mongering. I think the rest of this is just basically just like biblical fear.
The torments of hell. The Bible says the smoke of their torment shall ascend up forever and ever. And just as people thought it was funny to mock Noah, many people think that it's funny to mock Jesus and to mock Christians. They take the name of Jesus in vain. God has a gift of everlasting life.
But you mock other minority groups even. Christians aren't definitely a minority group, but you mock minority LGBTQ people all the time.
That he wants to give to you for free. He paid for it. He died on the cross for all of your sins. But he's not going to force you into his presence against your will. You have to make a choice.
Look at this.
The Bible says, for the wages of sin is death.
Shut up. All right, so like if you go to his videos, let's just look here. How many videos he's got about LGBTQ people? There's one. There's a trans one. So queer, trans. He's always interviewing people who aren't don't do their due diligence and look into who he is before they talk to him. But yeah, some cringy content out there. So it takes a village. So if you want to take a shot at Matt Powell, do it. He's not a honest interlocutor. He's a dishonest person and a bad actor. So yeah, forget this guy. Forget this guy. So for the only thing that you can take away from this is that he gave us this little thing to read about later after the show, where I'm gonna read about the subduction here. All right, but for right now, I'm gonna wrap up this segment of the show. Do you believe Matt Powell about the evidence for the flood of Noah? Do you think those pieces of evidence that he presented were substantive? I don't, but if you do, tell me down below. Remember to be kind, take care, and we'll see you next time.
Well, I don't know how many years on this earth I got left. I'm gonna get real weird with it.